and welcome to Framing the Foundation podcast. I'm your host, Sid Palulkar. I'm super excited today with the recording of the first podcast episode, and I would like to welcome a very good friend of mine and a very experienced clinical research professional, uh, Audrey Rossow. Audrey, welcome, and thank you so much for making time for this podcast. Audrey comes with tons of experience in the industry, with over 30 years of experience. I would say 3 decades of experience working across small, mid-sized, large pharmaceuticals. She's recently serving in the role of Senior Director, Clinical Operations at Presarix, which is a radiopharmaceutical based out of Belgium. But Audrey and me had the pleasure to working together for the last decade, and I've known her over a period of time, and I'm super excited to have her on board this very first episode. So, Audrey, thank you so much, and welcome to Framing the Foundation podcast. So let's just dive right in. So 30 years in the industry. Audrey, just take us through what your journey has been and how you have evolved in your career over a period of time.
Sure. So, probably like many of us, my path was not predestined or any stepwise way. So, unlike sort of a dentist or maybe, I don't know, a dog walker or whatever, people who know what they want to do, I didn't know. I didn't know where I was going to end up. I was at the University of New Hampshire, and I was a psychology major, and I helped a PhD student with her dissertation. She was observing mothers and infants in the home, doing attachment theory research. So I helped her. That little gig got me a job when I graduated at Children's Hospital in Boston, working with a developmental psychologist for 4 years. Long hours, very little pay, but it was in research. And I, by the way, grew up in the Boston area. So I was originally from Arlington. So, commutable distance. And then that got me a job. It was industry sponsored, but it was at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston as sort of a project coordinator. 5.5-year study of pravastatin, so sponsored by Bristol Myers Squibb.
Interesting.
So that was a long, big study, phase 3B, and then that ended, and I became a CRO at a very CRA at a very small CRO. So again, it was just, I didn't even know what a CRO was. I don't think I even knew what industry was back then. But it was just like one thing led to the other. So at the CRO, I moved up into project management. Then I went from that small CRO to a sponsor company here in Massachusetts. So honestly, it was not it was just one thing led to the next thing. And it was luck, and it was sort of curiosity and just working really hard and taking on roles and challenges, and just trying to learn as much as I could about the industry as I move forward. So that's kind of how I ended up moving along. Worked at a couple of different CROs, a couple of sponsor companies, and then I worked for about 8 years for myself as an independent consultant.
Well, that's great. I mean, looking at your career trajectory, did starting from a site, did that really give you a better perspective of what clinical research is, or does that help you better understand what a site team member goes through while making project management decisions?
I think so. I think having as many roles as you can have helps. And I think sort of, I don't want to say starting at the bottom because that doesn't sound right, but having as many perspectives of a project. So, being at the Brigham and coordinating the study, but also being connected to a site and seeing what that was all about. And then being a CRA and being on site and understanding what it's like from the site's point of view. What happens when they see a patient? What happens when they get a data query? What happens when the study medication doesn't arrive on time? So I think that was invaluable in terms of seeing that side of it. And I'm really glad that I had that experience. And also having been on the sponsor side and the CRO side kind of is I don't know how unique it is, but it definitely helped me to understand both sides of the equation, because I'm not sure that always people do. And I also think that having a little bit of project my career's been sort of clinical project management and clinical operations, which sometimes people don't understand or they call it different things in different companies.
That's correct. Yeah.
But to me, it's sort of can be very tactical and hands-on and detailed oriented, and project management can be a little more of a step back and, timelines and budgets and things. And I think being able to do both of them, it helped me certainly in consulting. It allows me to kind of step into different roles at kind of different levels. And I guess the thing is, I've never shied away from a challenge. If someone's willing to teach me something, I'm willing to do it.
No,
Really is kind of
that's great. And I think for listeners, I probably did not mention this, but Audrey has worked in senior management positions in clinical operations, right from head of clinops to senior director. Again, Audrey, I know you much better than probably folks watching, but I feel that your experience was highly valued when we worked together, and how we have evolved, both of us. I think we have both complemented each other throughout our careers, supporting each other at different roles. But take me through your experiences when you were like leading teams and pretty much driving clinical operations. What are some of the challenges or hurdles that you faced? I think this is an important question, because when we bring in team members to really help us or try to set up a department, I think there are unique challenges versus trying to walk into an organization where processes are set up. So, any thoughts that you want to share so that the listeners can probably learn from your experience?
Yeah, I think the big things are kind of understanding right away what the priorities are, what you have in place, what you don't have in place. And that depends on, where the organization is in terms of its sort of clinical development strategy and organization. I just read something, someone said that, in terms of like, you can't have everything. So you really want to have quality kind of in a risk-based way. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. So you want to have, the best quality where the risk is. So basically, having SOPs in place, not 100 of them, but, 5 or 10, for example, and having the resources where you really need them. I think the biggest thing is now with ICH E6R3, going to be really
Right.
Embedded very soon in everything we do. It's really incumbent upon us to make sure that we're resourced appropriately internally to be able to build groups that can oversee what we outsource. I mean, that's always been true, but I think it's going to be critical that we document some of these things, and having those resources and building them. The first thing I do is try to understand, particularly when I was a consultant, is, what is the sort of the orchestra, if you will, the components of what the organization has that clinical operations can complement. Do we have project management? Do we have regulatory? Do we have QA? And what of that is outsourced? I mostly worked in pretty small companies, so some of that is outsourced and some of that is in-house. So it's really just understanding, where the gaps are and where the needs are. And, that just takes a little bit of fact finding and some honest conversations with, the team that's in place. And then it's usually a combination of, working with a functional service provider and or the CRO and or consultants, whether they're part-time or full-time, really building a group that just is the right fit for the need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just just from, since you've been in leadership positions before, like how would you like define leadership, and or as per your understanding, what makes a great leader or a good leader?
Yeah, I mean, my quote, I think in the slide there was, I took a quote from Angela Ahrendts, who's the former CEO of a British, the luxury fashion line, Burberry. But she said, the sign of a great leader is knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. So what I think that speaks to is emotional intelligence. And what I mean by that is that, my background is really full of a program management approach to clinical trials. So, what I mean by that is you have data management, clinical operations, biostats, you have the drug, the study drug, or whatever form it's in, regulatory, quality assurance. You have all these different people that need to come together. And the critical thing is saying, where are the gaps? What do we need that we don't have? So you have a CRO, but you have to oversee the CRO. So you have to have subject matter experts that can do that. You can outsource that. You can hire consultants. That's fine. But I think having, being able to say, I don't know, we have a gap here, but we can fill that gap, I find is, and I'm thinking along the lines of CEOs, who
Mhm.
you can say, we have a gap here and we need to fill that gap. Again, it's sort of like the orchestra, and then the CEO is sort of the conductor, and being able to say, I may not know what this role is, but we have science, we have technology, we have money and resourcing, and that's all good. But this picture has to come together at the end if we're going to move this asset forward. So I find, believe it or not, that's something that being able to say, I'm not sure, but let's figure this out together. And when I was a CRA, that was ingrained in me because when I was mentored as a CRA, they said, you're going to go to sites. You're going to be talking to someone who not only went to medical school, but then maybe beyond, is in a specialty that you're never going to be able to, speak equally to him or her, the principal investigator. So you have to learn to say, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll get back to you. And then you need to get back to them. So for me, that kind of transparency and honesty goes a long way versus, trying to make it up on the, spot. That never goes well. So I think that's part of a good leader. And again, I learned that, when I was pretty early on. And it also shows that a leader is willing to work with experts, finding other experts, and again, making that program team of experts robust, because all those pieces and parts have to work together, really, to have a well-functioning team. The other thing is, I read an article the other day. It was a quote by Mark Cuban, who I guess is on Shark Tank, and he's an entrepreneur. And he said,
Yeah, he owns Dallas Cowboys as well.
yes, he does. And he was saying that, it's like intelligence and hard work, but one aspect of an employee that makes a great employee is those that take care of their physical and emotional well-being. And I thought that was interesting. And I, in the US kind of corporate work a lot system, I was surprised, but it might be changing. And I just thought that was really neat. So I guess what I would say is other leadership qualities, the ones that I was thinking about, what I try to do is I try to lead by example. I don't have people that work for me do things I wouldn't do. And if I don't know how to do it, right, I don't say, you do it and figure it out. I'll either help them figure it out, or we'll figure it out together, or we'll find someone who knows how to do it. If I make a mistake, I'm perfectly willing to say I was wrong or I made a mistake, and let's move on. I don't really tolerate people that are kind of unkind or bullies. I just like to nip that in the bud. The drama. We have so much to do in small companies. We just don't have time for a lot of drama. So I tell people, just always avoid that. I'm an optimist. I think you kind of have to be. And, lastly, what I've learned is I try to hit kind of issues kind of head on. And I found that over time that kind of saying, this is a problem, we need to fix it, doesn't work. I think approaching it in a sort of a risk management way. So saying, this, whether it's a personnel issue or resources or quality, and saying, this is a risk to the organization, kind of works. It's a little more palatable than,
Right.
I think pointing fingers just doesn't work. I think we just have to say, if you say, I need more resources, well, who doesn't? But saying, here's the risk and here's why. Because I think what we're really realizing now as a community and as an industry is everything's really getting to be risk-based. We
No,
can't have
that's
everything we
a great
want
point.
all the time.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great point. I think one of the other great points you mentioned was clinical operations and program management, because I'm pretty sure you have experienced this, and it's coming from your experience that in a small company, usually you do not have the program management function,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is either relayed by the CMO, and there are a few people around who are their functional expertise, but not really someone who's trying to bring all of them together. Which is what a program manager does. So operations sometimes has to like step into those shoes
Yes.
and fulfill that function until company grows to a size where they can make those
Yeah.
right hires with those right expertise. So that's a great point. That's a great point. But again, coming to back to leadership, you know, have you like worked with people that have inspired you, or any traits that you have probably would have picked up from someone that you worked in the past that was pretty inspirational, and those qualities that you want to take
Yeah,
forward?
I think you know, people that have been very like I say, not a lot of drama, very fair, very, we're not here to place blame. We're here to just fix the problem, move on. Which isn't to say that they won't do a root cause analysis to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's always there. But it's not about the people, it's about the process and the project. And again, early on, that the person that I'm thinking of, just always, I worked with this leader in a couple of different roles at a company. And then when I was consulting, it was that program management. He brought it to a very small company, and they were sort of like, why am I sitting in a meeting with CMC and this one and that one? And like, why are we all talking about things? And he was trying to explain to them that because they had not been exposed to a program management um, process before, but once they understood it. So I think having that, and he also had just a really nice way about him, about appreciating every function, saying, I'm not here to tell
Right.
you how to do your job. I'm not the subject matter expert. I know that you are, and you bring value, and here's how you bring value. And so I think that ability to be a little bit humble was in
Right.
a leader was really neat. Um, so I think that's a key personality trait that I really respect. Um,
Yeah, I mean, in
and
short, not stepping on people's toes, having
yes,
people with the right experience own that particular decision,
yeah,
whereas
yes,
you can help facilitate them to make that decision.
yes. But on the other hand, or on same hand, maybe, I also admire people that can say, this is a problem.
Mm,
I don't know how to solve it, but we need to solve it. Like we all need
right.
to sit in this room until we can figure this out. Again, not, kind of, being willing to face things in a non, sort of threatening, non blaming way, but saying, we can't, this can't continue. We can't keep missing this deadline or that deadline over and over again. So let's do a root cause analysis. In other words, sometimes I think people can be afraid to, like, someone's feelings are going to get hurt, and
Mhm.
that's understandable. But doing it in a way where you're aware of that, but that we just have to solve some problems, and that's hard, especially again in really small companies. So
Right.
I think the two things is kind of having that humility, but also being willing to step up and say this process is a problem, and we need to fix it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great point. I also feel that, ensuring that we are focusing on trying to explain situations which are more organizational focused versus your individual functions focused. I think when you show people, the larger picture, I think it's much more
Mm,
easy for people to work together and integrate together versus
yeah.
when they are working in silos. I think that's what
Yes.
creates problems. And I just want to gauge your experience there. But I know you mentioned you've been a consultant for quite a bit of time. So when a consultant moves into an organization, I think it's a very different set of eyes which they are looked at. I've been a consultant for a long time as well. An external person coming in and trying to like change everything, which is why a lot of people don't want them to get in, interfere with everything that they're doing. And again, the goal is not to do that, but it's always perceived that way, which creates a little bit of friction between teams. Just would love to hear about your thoughts on that. Like, how should one navigate if they're coming in as a consultant, or how should the team that's already there interact with the consultant? And try to understand their expectations. I think it's just expectations across two different teams, which are not very clear. um,
Yeah,
people
that's a
sometimes feel threatened that you've got a consultant who's gonna take away my job. But that's not the plan, right? It's certain set of expertise, which is why somebody's got it. But would love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, that's a great question. I have a lot of different perspectives. So first of all, it's like the perspective of the person's definition. So there are some people think of a consultant as a consultant. You are consulting. You have expertise, and I'm paying you for that. Some people think of a consultant as a contractor. You're
Uh-huh.
here to do the task, and I
Yeah.
guess that's true. I guess, right? I mean, let's just say medical writing. Have you worked with a medical writer who was very transactional, and have you worked with a medical writer who was very embedded and like very experienced and could say you don't want to write that way. The agency won't like that, or the
Right.
IRB won't like that. And take anything. Same thing with regulatory. Same thing with ClinOps. So then the question becomes, all right, well, that's semantics. I'm calling them a consultant because that's what my company calls them. So then we get down to sort of the job description and the scope, or the person's CV and their expertise. I think that's where it's like sort of like what are we asking this person to do? Then what does their CV and experience and training and
Right.
expertise need to be? And then what are we asking them to do? That's always my first question: is do I need more resource? What do I need? And what's the best person to fit that? To me, and as a full-time employee now and a director, I'm always thinking that way. Like, it's a whole different ask to ask for a head count. It's much easier, makes much more sense to me to say, can I have a 20 or 30 hour person who can
Right.
come and go and understands that? And hiring an employee is a whole other thing, because
Right.
As a consultant, you're coming in, you're doing your job. You're not looking for, benefits and bonuses and all that, or a career track. Whereas when you're an employee,
Right.
so when I went from a consultant to an employee, my shift was very different. And it was I was looking for something really different. But as far as what you're saying about people, I mean, I is thinking, oh, this person's coming in. I mean, I don't see it that way at all. I see consultants, well, particularly in the Boston area where there are many of them and many resources. I don't think we could do what we do without them. I mean, to me, consultants are critical at times when, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but when we're having layoffs in the industry, work still needs to get done. And to be fair to consultants, if a company has layoffs, they're sometimes the first people to go.
First people
So
to
it's
go.
kind
Yeah.
of it's a double-edged sword, and I think that they're critical to getting the work done. And I guess it's a question of people understanding what their role is, and they're filling a resourcing need that needs to be filled. And it's just, you can't always get head count, and I just don't know if sometimes people understand that and can appreciate kind of the dollars and cents behind
Right.
resourcing. I don't
Yeah.
know if that answers the question or not.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great perspective. I think I have a similar belief as well. Like when consultants are brought in, sometimes they're not really taken in the right spirit, and sometimes consultants don't ask the right questions as well. Like when they get on a job, try to understand what the expectations are from the company. Because they have been brought in for a certain skill set, and
Mm-hmm.
not having a clear picture as to why they are there sometimes can be, because I think a ClinOps consultant is like come in and run a study, but there's different facets to it where a small company might require you to be much more strategic as well and then just be operational. So I think it's a double-edged sword, but I think it's more about, I think, asking the right questions and communicating with the people who have brought you in to understand what the expectations are, and then you can pivot because you have the experience to be able to either be core operational or be core strategic, whatever is needed. But
Yeah.
just you mentioned a very good point about layoffs right now. So that brings me to the next question, like current trends in the industry. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on layoffs, but would love to hear like what you think about the current trends, and would
Yeah.
you see how the industry would evolve?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been to some conferences lately, and people have been talking about the past couple of years from different perspectives. And I think the past couple of years have been really unstable. Everybody knows this in terms of biotech, and funding and things like that, and mergers and acquisitions. And during COVID, it was, yay Moderna and yay Pfizer, and we love pharmaceutical companies. And then, since 2022 and 2023, big decrease in IPOs and funding, deals and raises, and an increase in mergers and acquisitions and in layoffs. Quite frankly, I've never seen anything like it in the 30 years I've been doing this. I always said, it's never going to be an issue to find a job. And quite frankly, it took me, when I left my previous job, it took me almost 8 months to find my current position. So I think it'll turn around. It's everyone's trying to figure out what's happening next. The other thing, I think, as an industry, we tend to be slow to change. COVID kind of forced a couple things on us, like decentralized clinical trials, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But I think that's a challenge as well, the fact that we are slow to change. And then I think the other kind of challenge I see is that there isn't a good way, and I think we'll get into this more, is to mentor the next generation, which I think is part of the whole genesis of this podcast series is, if you're coming into this industry, like, what do you do to get your foot in the door? Because my path, that's fine that it went the way it did, and I just don't know. We had a lot of training, a lot of mentoring at the CRO I started out at. I just don't know what kind of training is going on at CROs these days. So
we
I'm
see a
not
lot of
sure there.
transition as well, right? People come into a
Yeah,
CRO and just leave for the next job, which is why, as sponsors, you have to deal with changing CRAs every 6 months, which is really frustrating.
it is, and it's causes a lot of churn and redo and cost and retraining. So I think the whole financial shift in our industry is scary. However, there's things about our industry. Our industry is very innovative. We're very intelligent, and we tend to be very optimistic. So I think we have that going for us. The other thing is we love data. So I was just at a conference a few weeks ago, and Ken Getz, who works at the Tufts Center for Drug Development, and also I think is one of the founders of CISCRP, the Center for the Investigation and Study of Clinical Research Participation, both here in Boston. He did a talk called Operating Conditions and Clinical Trial Performance, and Novatech did a talk as well. And so they did, they had some, and I can send you the link, or
send me the link and I'll put it in the description as well for you want to
about kind of what's been going on and what's coming next. So I think that because we love data, we're going to continue to kind of look through the data and see what's going on, and then evolve. It takes us time, but we will. And I just think that patients need us. We need to continue to work and, find advances in medicine and cures. And I don't think we're ever going to stop doing that. I think it's going to look different. In fact, in terms of evolutions, one of the things we see when we go to conferences, patient centricity, E6R3, ICH, DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then decentralized trials. And I think, I'm sure you've seen it, those things keep coming up. None of it's easy. None of it's, simple. There's pros and cons to all of it. Well, E6R3 that's going to be what it's going to be, but there are, many, there are webinars that, can talk about what that's going to look like and best practices for that. But these other three, patient centricity, DEI, and decentralized trials, have, kind of pros and cons. But those are the things I'm talking about. We're so slow to change, like patient centricity. Well, of course, right? But, what does that really look like? I mean, are we really bringing trials to patients, for oncology? What does that even look like? Or for spirometry? Yes, there are spirometers that, can go to a patient's home now. Decentralized trials, like how am I, as a coordinator, going to get if I'm at a university, how am I going to share my my electronic medical record with the CRA? And can I even do that? So we have to work these things out. Lots of vendors come in and entrepreneurs with great ideas, but sometimes, it's kind of the nuts and bolts, the devil's in the details. So, what I would tell people is go to these conferences and ask questions about, and, read and compare and assess. Because diversity, equity, inclusion isn't just about race and ethnicity. It's
Right.
about age. It's about ability to get, if you're in a wheelchair, or if you have hearing or visual issues, or you live on a reservation. I mean, it's not just race and ethnicity. So, I think those things are helpful, but I think there are other things we can do. And in terms of the market, I've been thinking about this a lot. I think it's going to settle out. I think it's going to kind of be more kind of lean and compact. I think that sponsors are going to continue to really think about what they move forward from discovery to development. I think that as they are now, investors are going to want to see proof of concept data before they invest, which means we're going to have to think about where we get our early phase funding and preclinical. I think boards, I've seen are going to become less tolerant of this kind of leapfrogging where the objectives aren't met and the milestones keep getting pushed out. Now, whether that means, then I thought, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, we get better at enrollment projections and benchmarking and enrollment calculations, because we've been not so good at that as an industry for many, many years. Will we get better at feasibility, right? Site feasibility and analyzing that data? Will we get better at, more realistic investor and board communication about, I mean, has anybody ever said to Sid, like, I don't know, why can't we move faster with this IRB? And you start describing an informed consent form process and they go, stop, right? So there's the technical aspects of what we do. And then we start talking about, I don't know, Health Canada, and people they don't want to hear it. So it's that gap between all the minutia of what we do and then how it translates. So it's very long cycle times. It's very expensive. And it's having those conversations, and then maybe better clinical development plans and integrated development plan strategies, better, sooner, I don't know. And that goes back to program management, better and more realistic patient recruitment retention plans that involves funding and resourcing. Maybe different IPO models and funding models. And maybe I just kind of made a list. I'm looking at it, a new type of investing matrix, or community investing. I don't know. I was just kind of throwing things on a list here to say,
That's community investing. I think that's a great point. I think we haven't explored that much at all.
Yeah. Like what if, what I started to think really outside the box. I'm like, well, what if we had like community investors or like employee investors, or some way to do this in a different way, because it's just,
they do have they do have like foundation investments. For example, Michael J. Fox recently just, had a huge, generation of, I would say, for to support any kind of like clinical activities. I think they're funding these first, again, focused on Parkinson's. I think they're funding the entire industry. So there are grants available. They have gone ahead and raised a lot of money. So I think that those kind of foundations are great, but not a lot of these foundations have visibility as Michael J. Fox has.
Yes.
That's why probably they struggle to raise money sometimes. I don't know, just throwing it out there. I don't have the facts to back it up, but that's, from an optics perspective, like we know Michael J. Fox because they're always in the news. There are so many other foundations which don't have a lot of visibility unless you're specifically working in that particular therapy area as a clinician. You would not be aware. For example, I was working in sickle cell, and there were quite a bit of foundations that support sickle cell projects, and you wouldn't know it until you started working in that therapy area.
Right.
So I think just for the masses to know, it would be helpful, and then, as you said, community could invest in such foundations so that the money could be used appropriately for clinical development.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out in the next year or two, but I don't think it's ever going to be like it was, but that's not a bad thing. It's just a question of what, what sort of the market will look like, the job market, et cetera, et cetera. So, So that's, I think those trends. And again, I think these trends we see at conferences, the patient um, inclusion and these other things are, it's interesting because there are always these entrepreneurs and these vendors have some of them have some really neat ideas and technology of
Mhm.
how to make our lives easier. And I don't know, how much we're willing and able to adopt them. And coming from mostly small companies with small budgets, I'm the first one to say, well, I love the technology, I love the idea, but we just can't afford
Yeah,
it right
don't have
now.
the
It's
budget
just
for it. No, I
yeah,
totally agree.
yeah.
Great. Audrey, we're just 35 minutes into this discussion. I think this time just flew away, and we can go on for hours and hours, I know, discussing your experience and your background. But just want to thank you again for this opportunity to speak today. I'm hoping we connect again
Yes.
and speak again sometime down the line. But for engagement opportunities for the next generation of clinical researchers watching this, I'll put the details for Audrey's contact details in the description of this video. So do reach out to her if you have any questions, queries, or just to network. Again, Audrey, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you,
Happy
everyone.
holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays and happy New Year to everyone. Hopefully,
Happy New Year.
we'll release this in the first half of New Year. So we'd love to get people's comments. And we're going to have many more people come in and talk about their experiences as well. So, again, thank you, Audrey. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a fantastic holiday. Thank you.